He saved a beautiful stranger in the taiga, and that night she did something unexpected. The taiga was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The snow covered the ground in thick layers, muffling every sound except for the occasional creaking of pine trees swaying in the cold wind. The forest stretched endlessly in all directions, a frozen world of white and green that could both enchant and intimidate anyone who dared to wander into it. Among the towering trees and hidden icy paths, a lone man was moving carefully. His boots crunched softly against the snow, and his breath came out in little clouds that quickly vanished in the cold air. He had been traveling alone for several days, used to the solitude that the vast wilderness demanded. His name was Andre, a man in his late 20s with a strong build and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He knew the forest better than most. He had grown up near the edge of the taiga, learning from his father how to survive its dangers, from sudden storms to hidden pitfalls. Yet even with his experience, he respected the forest and never underestimated it. That morning, Andre had woken early. The frost was already thick, and the sunlight barely reached the forest floor. He adjusted his heavy coat, tightened the straps on his backpack, and checked his gear. He had been planning to cross a frozen stream that he had studied on the map, a shortcut to a small village on the other side of the forest. But the taiga was never predictable. The snow had been deeper than he expected, hiding rocks and uneven ice under its white blanket. Step by careful step, he moved forward, testing the ice before putting his full weight down. Every sound was magnified in the stillness, the snap of a twig, the soft crunch of snow, the distant call of a crow. Andre enjoyed this quiet. It made him feel alive and alert, a small human moving cautiously in a world much larger than himself. Then, just as he reached the middle of the frozen stream, he heard it, a faint cry. It was almost swallowed by the wind, but he could make it out if he concentrated. It was a sound of fear, mixed with pain, and it immediately sent a chill through him, not from the cold but from concern. He froze, listening. The cry came again, slightly stronger, more desperate. Without a second thought, Andre dropped his backpack carefully onto the snow and began moving toward the sound. He scanned the area, eyes sharp for any movement. The cry led him to a small clearing where the snow had been disturbed. At first, he only saw the marks of a fall, a small depression in the snow, but then he noticed her. She was lying partially in a shallow ditch, her long coat twisted around her and her face pale from the cold. Her hair was spread around her head like dark threads against the snow. Andre immediately ran to her side. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice firm but gentle. She blinked slowly, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain made her wince. Andre quickly realized that she had hurt her leg in the fall. Carefully, he helped her into a sitting position, supporting her back. "You're going to be fine. Just stay still for now," he said. She nodded weakly, shivering uncontrollably despite the thick coat she wore. Andre noticed that she wasn't just cold, she was exhausted, hungry, and frightened. He took off his own heavy jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth from his coat immediately began to soothe her shivering. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and shaky. She tried to smile, but the cold made it difficult. Andre surveyed the area. The stream was frozen, but the ice was thin in some places. He knew they couldn't stay here, it was unsafe, and the temperature was dropping quickly. He gently lifted her into his arms, careful not to worsen her injury, and began walking toward a small rise he had noticed nearby. The snow was deep, and each step required effort. He spoke quietly as they moved, trying to calm her nerves. "You're safe now. I've got you. Just hold on a little longer." She clung to him tightly, her fingers brushing against his arm. There was a strange mix of fear and trust in her gaze, and for a moment, Andre felt the weight of responsibility settle fully on his shoulders. He had rescued many people before, travelers lost in the forest or injured in accidents, but something about this moment felt different. It wasn't just the danger. It was the connection, fragile and immediate, that formed in shared vulnerability. Finally, he reached a small cluster of trees where the snow formed a natural shelter from the wind. He gently laid her down on a bed of pine branches he had gathered, trying to create as comfortable a spot as possible in the freezing forest. He removed his gloves and examined her leg carefully. There was a visible bruise, maybe a small sprain, but no fracture. Still, he knew it was important to keep her warm and to move slowly when the time came. He took off his scarf and wrapped it around her neck, adding another layer of warmth. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. "Lena," she replied after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "All right, Lena," he said. "I'm Andre, you're safe now. I'll stay right here with you." She nodded again, closing her eyes briefly. Andre could see the exhaustion etched into her features. He pulled his coat tighter around himself and began building a small fire using twigs and dry branches he had collected earlier. The snow made it difficult, but he was patient. Soon, a small flame flickered to life, casting a warm glow on their faces. The smell of burning pine filled the cold air, bringing a sense of security to the clearing. Lena's shivering began to subside as the heat reached her. For a while, neither spoke. Andre watched the flames dance, thinking about the unpredictability of the forest and how quickly a simple journey could turn dangerous. Lena, on the other hand, seemed lost in thought, her eyes following the firelight as if trying to understand what had happened to her. Finally, she spoke. I didn't expect anyone to find me," she said quietly, almost ashamed. "And yet here I am," Andre replied, trying to keep his tone light. "You're lucky the forest didn't swallow you up." She gave a faint laugh, the first sound of normalcy since the fall. "I guess I am," she admitted. As the sky darkened, Andre continued to tend the fire. He checked her leg again, gently massaging it to keep circulation going. Lena watched him, a mixture of gratitude and curiosity in her eyes. She seemed amazed at how calmly and efficiently he handled the situation, how his movements were confident yet careful. Andre, in turn, noticed her resilience. Despite being lost and injured in the middle of a frozen forest, she was alert, aware, and surprisingly calm once she realized he was there to help. Night began to fall and the temperature dropped further. The forest became darker, the shadows longer, and the wind colder. Andre made sure the fire was safe, placing some larger logs around it to shield it from the wind. He offered her some of the food he carried, dried meat and nuts, which she accepted reluctantly. They ate in silence, the only sounds being the crackling of the fire and the distant whisper of the wind through the trees. Then, as the stars began to appear, Lena did something unexpected. She reached out and took Andre's hand, holding it for a moment longer than necessary. There was no need for words. The gesture spoke of trust, relief, and something deeper that neither of them fully understood yet. Andre looked at her, surprised, but he didn't pull away. The forest around them was still, but in that small circle of warmth, a bond had begun to form. A bond born from vulnerability, courage, and the quiet strength of surviving together in the harsh taiga. The night stretched on, cold and long, but for the first time, neither of them felt completely alone. Andre knew that the forest was still dangerous, that the journey was far from over, but he also knew that together, they had taken the first step toward safety. And in that moment, the unexpected trust and connection between a stranger and her rescuer became the first light in an otherwise harsh and unforgiving wilderness. As he watched her drift into a fitful sleep, Andre felt a strange sense of purpose. He had saved someone's life today, yes, but he also realized how unpredictable life could be. One moment, a person is lost, frightened and alone. The next, a simple act of help can create a bond that might change both their lives forever. Outside the circle of firelight, the taiga loomed silently, full of hidden dangers. But inside, there was warmth, safety, and the quiet beginning of something neither of them expected. And as the night deepened and the wind howled around them, Andre stayed alert, keeping the fire alive and ready to face whatever the forest might throw at them next. But for now, there was only the quiet companionship, the soft warmth of a fire, and the unspoken understanding that in this frozen wilderness, two strangers had found a fleeting moment of trust, courage, and connection that neither would forget. The night grew colder in the taiga, but the small fire Andre had built crackled steadily, casting warm light on the snow around them. Lena, still wrapped in his coat, began to relax, her shivering slowing. She could feel the warmth seeping into her bones, and for the first time since the fall, she allowed herself to breathe without tension. Andre kept his eyes on the surroundings, always alert, but he also tried to make her feel safe. The forest was dark, mysterious, and full of hidden dangers, yet here in the circle of firelight, it felt almost like a small world of their own. "Do you think the storm will get worse?" Lena asked, her voice quiet and hesitant. Andre shook his head slightly. "It shouldn't. The wind might rise, but I can handle it. We just need to stay warm tonight and move carefully tomorrow." She nodded, but her gaze kept drifting to the shadows of the forest. There was a tension in her posture, a nervousness that lingered even as her body grew warmer. Andre noticed it, and without pressing her, he tried to ease it. "You've been through a lot today," he said softly. "It's okay to be scared. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." Her lips curved into a faint smile, but she didn't speak. Instead, she watched him quietly, studying his movements as he carefully tended the fire. He placed more branches onto it, making sure the flames didn't die, and rearranged the pine boughs beneath them to provide extra insulation from the cold ground. Lena could see that he was skilled, precise, and calm under pressure. There was something comforting in that, something that made her feel she could trust him completely, even though she barely knew him. After a few minutes, Andre reached into his backpack and pulled out a small bundle of food. "I have some dried meat and nuts," he said, offering it to her. "Eat something. You need energy and it will help keep you warm." She hesitated, then took it slowly, nibbling at the food. The simple act of eating, something she hadn't been able to do properly for hours, gave her a small sense of normalcy. Andre ate a little as well, though his mind was still half on the forest outside their small haven. As they ate, the wind outside began to whistle through the trees. The sound was sharp and eerie, making the forest feel even more vast and empty. Andre tightened his jacket around himself and glanced at Lena. "You should try to rest," he said. "I'll stay awake and watch the fire. If anything happens, I'll know immediately." Lena looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "You've done this before, haven't you? Helping people in the forest?" she asked. He shrugged slightly. "A few times." "The taiga can be unforgiving. I've learned to expect the unexpected, but every time is different. You never know who you'll meet or what will happen." She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. There was a quiet understanding growing between them. In the harshness of the taiga, where life and death could hinge on a single moment, trust was rare and precious. And here, in this frozen wilderness, two strangers had found it in each other. As the night deepened, Andre worked to build a slightly larger fire, gathering dry branches from nearby. He moved carefully, knowing that loud noises could attract wild animals, yet needing enough heat to keep them both safe. Lena, watching him, suddenly rose on shaky legs and began gathering small twigs that had fallen near the fire. "I can help," she said quietly, her voice a little firmer than before. Andre looked at her, surprised. He hadn't expected her to move so soon or to take initiative. "Be careful," he warned, though he allowed her to continue. She moved gingerly, careful not to disturb the snow too much, and handed him the twigs. Her actions were small, but they showed courage and determination, a refusal to remain helpless even in a dangerous situation. The fire grew stronger, its warmth more reassuring. Lena sat back down next to it, and for a moment they simply watched the flames together. The silence was comfortable this time, filled with the quiet crackle of burning wood rather than fear. Andre noticed that she seemed calmer, more alert but less anxious. She had begun to regain some of her strength, and he could see a glimmer of resilience in her eyes. "Tell me," Lena said after a while, "how did you learn all this? How to survive out here?" Andre smiled faintly. "My father taught me. He was a woodsman. I grew up learning how to read the forest, how to listen to it, how to respect it. You can't control it, but you can survive if you understand it. And sometimes, helping others, it's just instinct." She nodded thoughtfully, as if absorbing the lesson not just about survival but about character and courage. There was a pause, then she asked softly, "Do you ever get scared?" "Of course," he said honestly. "Anyone would, but fear can't stop you. You have to act even when you're afraid. That's what keeps you alive." She considered his words, then smiled faintly, a little more genuinely this time. "I wish I had learned that sooner." As the hours passed, Andre kept the fire alive, and Lena slowly regained her strength. She began to talk more, telling him in fragments how she had become lost while hiking alone. She hadn't expected the forest to be so difficult, and she hadn't planned for the cold to be so intense. Andre listened carefully, nodding and offering advice where needed, but never interrupting. The bond between them grew quietly, without grand gestures, in the simple acts of caring and listening. He offered her water from his bottle, showed her how to rest safely on the pine boughs, and encouraged her to eat slowly to regain strength. She in turn began helping in small ways, gathering twigs, adjusting the firewood, and even spotting a patch of frozen ground that was safer to sit on. Outside, the forest seemed endless, dark, and unforgiving. But in their small circle of warmth, there was a sense of safety, of connection. Andre realized that Lena was not just grateful, she was courageous, capable, and unexpectedly strong. He had expected her to be weak or frightened, but she proved him wrong, showing initiative even when exhausted and cold. As midnight approached, the temperature dropped further, and frost began forming on the edges of their shelter. Andre added more branches to the fire and checked on her once again. "You're doing well," he said gently. "You're stronger than you think." Lena looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me," she said softly. "You would have managed," he replied with a reassuring smile. "You survived this long on your own, but I'm glad I was here. It's better when people help each other, especially in a place like this." For a while, they sat in silence, watching the flames. Andre's thoughts drifted to the dangers still outside, the wolves, the hidden ice, the deep snow, but he pushed them aside. For now, the important thing was the trust and bond that had formed between them. Lena, sensing his calm, felt her own fear lessen. She could feel the warmth not just from the fire, but from the quiet security of having someone who truly cared beside her. Then, in a moment that surprised Andre, Lena leaned closer and gently rested her hand on his arm. It was not just a gesture of gratitude, but a quiet declaration of trust. He looked at her, startled at first, but he didn't pull away. There was an understanding in that touch, a silent acknowledgement that they were no longer strangers, that in this cold and dangerous forest they had become allies, even something more. The wind howled outside, the trees swayed and snowflakes drifted down, but around the fire there was warmth, safety, and a fragile but growing connection. Lena's eyes closed for a moment, and Andre felt a strange mix of protectiveness and admiration. He realized that the night was far from over, and the journey ahead would test them further, but for now they had found comfort in each other's presence. And so, they settled for the night. Lena huddled close to the fire, wrapped in warmth, and Andre kept a careful watch. He made sure the fire wouldn't die, that they stayed safe, and that her leg remained supported. The forest could wait. For the first time, he allowed himself a quiet satisfaction. He had rescued someone, yes, but he had also discovered courage, resilience, and an unexpected bond that neither of them had anticipated. Outside, the taiga remained silent and intimidating, but inside their small circle of warmth, there was hope. Two strangers, thrown together by circumstance, had found trust, courage, and connection in the harshest of places. And that night, as snow fell softly around them and the fire flickered, they both understood something important. Survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about trust, understanding, and the willingness to face fear together. Andre knew that tomorrow would bring challenges, but he also knew that they had already faced the hardest test, the test of fear, trust, and human connection. And in that quiet, snowy night, with the fire casting shadows on their faces, a bond was born that neither the cold nor the wilderness could easily break. Morning came slowly in the taiga, the sky a pale gray, with soft snowflakes drifting down quietly. The fire from the night before had burned low, but Andre had managed to keep it alive long enough to give them warmth until dawn. Lena stirred as the weak morning light touched her face, blinking slowly and taking in the frozen forest around her. For a moment, the events of the previous night seemed almost unreal. She remembered the fall, the cold, and the terror, but she also remembered the warmth, the fire, and the strong presence of Andre, who had stayed with her and kept her safe. Andre was already awake, checking the small area around their makeshift shelter. He inspected the snow for signs of danger, broken branches, animal tracks, or any sign of weakness in the ice nearby. Lena watched him quietly, a mixture of admiration and curiosity in her eyes. She realized that his calm, careful movements were not just the result of skill, but also of experience. He had survived countless challenges in this forest, and that experience made him capable of handling situations that would overwhelm most people. "Good morning," Andre said softly, turning to her. "How do you feel?" Lena stretched carefully, wincing slightly as her leg protested. "A little sore," she admitted, "but better than last night." She smiled faintly, and he could see that her spirit was returning along with her strength. "That's good," he said. "We need to keep moving carefully today. The forest can be tricky, and the snow can hide dangers under its surface. But before we leave, let's have a small breakfast and warm up properly." He unpacked more of his rations, offering her some dried fruit and more nuts. Lena ate slowly, savoring the food as it gave her energy. While they ate, Andre pointed out small details in the forest, how certain trees could hide thin ice, how the tracks of animals might indicate a safer route, and how the wind direction could signal an approaching storm. Lena listened closely, realizing that he was teaching her not just about survival, but about how to read the forest with care and attention. Once they were ready, Andre helped her to her feet, supporting her as she tested her injured leg. She was cautious but stronger than he expected. Together, they began moving along a faint trail that Andre had spotted the night before. The snow was deep, slowing their progress, and the air was crisp and biting against their faces. Yet Lena felt a strange sense of empowerment. Even though she had been vulnerable and scared just hours ago, she was now walking through the forest alongside someone who had saved her, contributing her own effort to their journey. As they walked, they spoke quietly, sharing small stories about themselves. Lena revealed that she had been hiking alone because she wanted to experience the forest, to find peace and solitude away from her busy life in the city. But she hadn't anticipated the harshness of winter in the taiga. Andre, in turn, shared fragments of his life growing up near the edge of the forest, learning from his father how to survive, respect the land, and move through it carefully. These shared stories created a connection between them, one built not just on the events of the previous night, but on the understanding of each other's character and strength. Hours passed, and the snow began falling more heavily. Visibility decreased, and the forest seemed larger and more intimidating. The wind rose slightly, carrying a sharp chill that made their breath visible in thick clouds. Andre paused frequently, checking Lena's condition and ensuring that the path ahead was safe. She noticed that he was not just protective, but also respectful, allowing her to make small decisions about the path they took. She felt a sense of independence returning to her, even in the midst of the danger. At one point, they reached a narrow ridge with a frozen stream below. The snow was slippery and the risk of falling was real. Andre stepped carefully, testing each spot before moving. Lena hesitated, but he offered her a hand. "You can do this," he said gently. "Just follow my steps." She took his hand and stepped onto the ridge, trusting him completely. Every careful step forward strengthened her confidence, and she realized that fear could be overcome with caution, courage, and support. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the forest. Andre froze and turned toward the sound. Lena's heart raced, and she instinctively pressed close to him. It was a fallen branch breaking under the weight of snow, but the moment reminded them of how fragile their safety really was. Andre's calm reassured her. "It's nothing," he said quietly. "Just a branch, but stay alert. The forest is always full of surprises." The snowstorm began to pick up again, and the trail became harder to follow. Visibility dropped, and the wind whipped around them, carrying cold flakes that stung their faces. Andre adjusted his scarf and led Lena carefully, keeping his eyes on subtle signs that indicated the safest path. He showed her how to step lightly, distribute her weight, and listen to the forest for subtle cues. Lena followed him closely, learning quickly and even offering suggestions when she noticed a more stable path. By late afternoon, they reached a small, partially sheltered clearing. Andre decided it would be wise to stop and rest, if only for a short time, to regain energy before continuing. He quickly built a small fire using dry branches and pine needles, and Lena helped by gathering twigs that were not buried in snow. The act of helping gave her a sense of purpose. She was no longer just a passive survivor but an active participant in their journey. As they warmed by the fire, Andre noticed that Lena was staring into the flames, lost in thought. "What's on your mind?" he asked. She hesitated, then said softly, "I'm surprised at how strong I feel even after everything that's happened. I didn't think I could handle being lost and injured, but I am handling it." Andre nodded. "Strength isn't just about muscle. It's about courage, determination, and the willingness to act even when you're afraid. You've shown all of that today." For a while, they sat in silence, watching the firelight dance across the snow. There was a quiet sense of accomplishment, a bond forming between them that went beyond gratitude. Lena felt safe, but also empowered. Andre felt admiration, not just for her survival, but for the way she had taken small steps to contribute to their safety, to be brave in the face of fear. As evening approached, Andre suggested they prepare for the night. The storm could worsen, and they needed to find a slightly safer area to rest. Lena nodded and began helping, gathering more pine boughs and arranging them for insulation. She showed a surprising knowledge of the forest, pointing out small depressions in the snow that could act as natural barriers against the wind. Andre realized that she wasn't as inexperienced as he had assumed. Her courage and resourcefulness were quietly impressive, and it made him respect her even more. They finally settled in a slightly more protected area, where the snow was less deep and the wind less harsh. Andre carefully checked Lena's leg again, making sure it was supported and not exposed to the cold. She winced slightly but smiled at him. "I think I'm getting stronger," she said. "You are," Andre agreed. "And tomorrow, we'll move carefully, and I think we can reach a place where you'll be safe." Night fell once again, heavier and colder than before. The wind howled through the trees and snowflakes swirled around their small shelter. But inside, their small fire provided warmth and safety. Lena sat close to the flames, her hands extended toward the heat, while Andre kept a vigilant watch. The storm outside reminded them that the forest was unpredictable, yet within their small circle of light, they found a sense of control and connection. Then, unexpectedly, Lena took the initiative again. She helped adjust the firewood, handed Andre branches, and even noticed a small draft in their shelter that needed to be blocked. Andre looked at her in surprise. "You're full of surprises," he said with a faint smile. Lena shrugged, a little embarrassed but proud. "I don't want to be helpless," she said simply. That simple statement struck Andre. It was not just bravery, it was determination, resilience, and an understanding that survival depended on both courage and action. He nodded in silent agreement, and for a moment the harsh forest seemed a little less threatening, their partnership a little stronger. As the night deepened, they sat quietly, the only sounds being the crackling of the fire and the distant whistle of the wind. Lena leaned closer to Andre, not out of fear but for warmth and comfort. He noticed, and instead of pulling away, he offered silent reassurance through his presence. In that moment, the forest could have been endless, cold, and unforgiving, yet inside the small circle of warmth, two strangers had formed a bond of trust, courage, and quiet connection. Andre realized something important. Survival wasn't just about physical strength or skill. It was about trust, partnership, and understanding. Lena had shown that she was not just someone he needed to protect. She was someone who could contribute, who could act, and who could face fear with him. And in that moment, he felt a deep respect for her resilience, courage, and spirit. The night stretched on, but for now, they found comfort in their small fire and in each other's presence. They had faced danger, shared stories, and discovered a growing connection that neither had expected. Andre knew that the forest still held challenges ahead, but he also knew that together, they could face whatever came next. The storm outside raged, but inside there was warmth, trust, and a quiet promise that survival in the taiga was possible, not just because of skill or luck, but because two people, strangers only a day ago, had learned to rely on each other in the harshest conditions. And as Lena rested her head briefly near the fire, Andre felt a sense of calm, knowing that they had already overcome the first true test of courage, trust, and partnership. The morning came with a heavy gray sky, the snow still falling steadily in the taiga. Andre woke first, his eyes scanning the forest carefully. The storm from the previous night had not fully passed, and a bitter wind whipped through the trees, carrying the sharp bite of frost. Lena stirred beside him, rubbing her eyes and stretching carefully. Her legs still ached, but she was determined to keep moving. "Ready to continue?" Andre asked softly, his voice steady. She nodded, gathering her courage. "Yes, we have to keep going." He helped her to her feet, supporting her as she tested her injured leg. The snow was deeper now, and each step required effort. Andre led the way, moving slowly and deliberately to avoid hidden dangers under the snow, like thin ice or frozen branches that could snap. Lena followed closely, mimicking his careful movements. She had learned from him over the past 2 days, observing his skill, his patience, and his sharp attention to the subtle signs the forest gave. The forest seemed quieter than usual, but the silence was deceptive. Snow muffled their footsteps, making it harder to hear approaching danger. Every shadow and shape in the distance felt unpredictable. Andre remained alert, constantly scanning the area, listening for the faintest hint of danger. Lena's breath came in visible clouds, and she shivered occasionally, but she refused to let fear control her. After a while, they came to a small frozen stream that they had to cross. The ice looked solid at first, but Andre knelt down to check it carefully. "It's thin here," he said. "We need to be extremely careful." Lena's eyes widened slightly, but she trusted him completely. Andre held out his hand, guiding her across. Each step was deliberate. One wrong move could mean slipping into the freezing water. Her heart raced, but she focused on following his instructions. Midway across, a patch of ice cracked loudly beneath her foot. Instantly, Andre grabbed her, pulling her close and steadying her. "Careful," he warned, his eyes sharp and alert. "I'm fine," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt, her pulse still pounding. "You're doing well," he reassured her. "Just a few more steps." Finally, they reached the other side safely. Lena exhaled in relief, feeling a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about surviving. She had learned to act with care, courage, and confidence. Andre gave her a small, approving smile, recognizing her growing strength and determination. They continued along a faint trail that Andre had spotted earlier. The forest grew denser and the snow deeper. Each step became more exhausting, and the cold seeped through their clothing. They rested occasionally, sharing small bites of food and warm sips of water. Lena noticed how carefully Andre monitored her condition, checking her leg and making sure she wasn't overexerting herself. His concern was quiet, respectful, and genuine. Hours passed, and the wind began to rise. The trees swayed dangerously and snow fell more heavily, making it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. Andre paused, crouching slightly as he examined the terrain. "We're close to a ridge that leads to safer ground," he said, "but it's tricky. We need to be alert." Lena nodded, gripping his arm lightly for support. She felt both nervous and determined. The taiga could be unforgiving, but she had grown more confident over the past 2 days. She was no longer the frightened, helpless person he had first found. She was an active participant in their survival. As they approached the ridge, the snow became slippery, and the risk of falling increased. Andre moved carefully, testing each step and pointing out safer spots for her to step. Lena followed him, trusting his guidance, but also using the skills he had taught her, watching the ice, shifting her weight and moving deliberately. Then suddenly the forest around them seemed to come alive with noise. A distant growl echoed through the trees. Andre froze, scanning the area. "Stay close," he whispered. "We're not alone." Lena's heart raced. She could see movement in the snow, subtle shadows that didn't match the trees. Andre took a small branch and tapped it against the snow to test the sound, his senses alert. The growl came again, closer this time. It could have been a wolf or a wild animal drawn by the storm, or perhaps a distant human who had strayed into the forest. Whatever it was, the danger was real. Andre positioned himself between Lena and the source of the sound, protective but calm. "We need to move carefully," he said. "Follow my lead, one step at a time." Lena's pulse was racing, but she stayed close, moving in rhythm with him. Her previous fear had transformed into focus. She knew that panicking would only make the situation worse. Her hands trembled slightly, but she moved with care, keeping her weight steady on the snow and ice. The ridge was narrow, and one misstep could have disastrous consequences. Andre led the way, and Lena followed, occasionally glancing at him for reassurance. Then the snow shifted under his foot and he slipped slightly. Before he could lose his balance completely, Lena acted instinctively. She reached out and grabbed his arm, holding him steady. Andre looked at her in surprise, his eyes wide. "You saved me," he said quietly. She nodded, her own heart racing. "I wasn't going to let anything happen to you," she said simply. That moment changed everything. For the first time, he saw her not just as someone he needed to protect, but as a capable, brave partner in this journey. Her courage surprised him, and he felt a deep respect for her resilience. They continued across the ridge, moving slowly and carefully, each step a test of patience and skill. The growls and sounds of the forest reminded them of the ever-present dangers, but they had grown more confident in their teamwork. Together, they navigated the treacherous path, supporting and trusting each other completely. As the afternoon passed, they reached a small clearing, partially sheltered from the wind by a cluster of trees. Andre decided it was wise to stop, gather firewood, and rest for a while. Lena eagerly helped, collecting twigs and branches that were dry enough to burn. The simple act of helping gave her a sense of purpose. She was no longer a passive survivor, but an active contributor to their safety. While the fire crackled, Andre checked her leg again, making sure it was properly supported. Lena winced slightly but smiled at him. "I think I'm stronger than yesterday," she said. "You definitely are," he replied. "And you've been incredibly brave today, not just with your leg but with the forest itself. Most people would panic, but you faced every challenge." For a while they sat quietly, the fire providing warmth and comfort in the middle of the cold, snowy wilderness. Outside, the taiga stretched endlessly, white and silent, but inside their small circle of light, there was safety, connection, and trust. Then unexpectedly, Lena spoke up. "I know the forest isn't safe, but I want to keep moving. I want to get out of here safely, but I don't want to just follow. I want to help." Andre looked at her, genuinely impressed. "You're full of surprises," he said, a faint smile appearing on his face. "Your courage is remarkable. All right, we'll do this together, step by step." As the storm outside intensified again, they prepared to continue. Lena's confidence had grown, and she was no longer hesitant to take small but meaningful actions. She helped adjust their gear, monitored the fire's last embers, and even pointed out a small path that appeared safer to navigate. Andre realized that she wasn't just a survivor. She was strong, capable, and brave in ways that went beyond his expectations. The night approached once more, bringing darkness and the promise of more challenges. The forest seemed more menacing in the dim light, but Andre and Lena pressed on, their trust and partnership keeping them focused. They moved slowly, deliberately, and carefully, watching each step, listening to every sound and staying alert for any sudden danger. Finally, as the last light of day faded, they reached a slightly safer area, a small rise that provided a clear view of the surrounding forest. The snow was still deep, but the terrain was more stable. They set up a temporary shelter and gathered firewood, preparing for the night ahead. Sitting by the fire, they reflected on the day's challenges. Lena's confidence had grown, and Andre's admiration for her bravery had deepened. Together they had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, and had come through stronger, more capable, and more connected. As the night fell, they huddled close to the fire, the cold biting at their faces but their spirits warm. The forest could be unforgiving, but they had learned that together. They were stronger than any storm, any danger, and any obstacle the taiga could throw at them. Andre realized that tomorrow would bring more tests, but he also knew that Lena's courage, resourcefulness, and growing confidence would make them an unbreakable team. The forest was vast and dangerous, but together, they had proven that even strangers could face the harshest challenges and survive. And in that quiet, snowy night, surrounded by the endless taiga, a bond of trust, courage, and partnership had formed, one that neither the cold nor the wilderness could easily break. The early morning light barely pierced the thick gray clouds above the taiga. Snow continued to fall gently, covering the forest in a soft, white blanket. Andre and Lena had spent the night in a small clearing, the fire providing warmth and a sense of safety against the harsh wilderness. Both of them were tired, their bodies sore from the long hours of walking, climbing, and navigating treacherous snow-covered terrain. Yet their spirits were stronger than ever. They had survived the worst of the storm, the dangers of the forest, and the uncertainty of being lost in the vast taiga together. "Are you ready to move?" Andre asked, his voice calm but alert. Lena nodded, her dark eyes bright despite the cold and exhaustion. "Yes. I want to get out of here safely." She stretched carefully, testing her leg, which still ached but was no longer as weak as it had been. The progress she had made over the past days amazed both of them. She had grown stronger, more confident, and surprisingly skilled at navigating the snowy wilderness. Andre helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they began walking toward a faint trail he had noticed the previous day. The wind was gentler now, though still sharp, and the snow made each step difficult. They moved slowly, steadily, and with purpose. Each step was measured, each glance carefully scanning for hidden dangers. The forest around them seemed quieter than usual, but the silence felt different now. It was filled with anticipation, a sense of approaching safety after days of uncertainty. Hours passed as they continued, each step taking them closer to civilization. Andre led the way, carefully choosing paths with stable snow and avoiding hidden ice or deep drifts. Lena followed closely, her trust in him complete. But she was no longer just following. She was participating, alert and resourceful, pointing out safer routes, steadying him when the snow shifted underfoot, and even spotting subtle signs of a path through the trees that might otherwise have been overlooked. By midday, the forest began to thin slightly. The trees were more spaced out, the snow less treacherous, and small hints of human presence appeared, an old fence post here, a worn trail there. Lena's heart lifted at the sight. "We're getting close, aren't we?" she asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Yes," Andre replied, a small smile appearing on his face. "There's a small village just beyond that ridge. If we keep moving carefully, we'll be safe soon." They approached the ridge cautiously. The snow was still deep, and the slope required careful navigation. But together, they moved steadily, using all the skills they had developed over the past days. Andre noticed Lena's strength and determination, realizing that she had changed completely from the frightened, shivering stranger he had found in the snow. She was brave, resourceful, and unafraid to take action when it mattered most. As they reached the top of the ridge, a small plume of smoke appeared in the distance, a sign of a village or ranger station. Relief washed over both of them. The journey through the wilderness, the fear, the cold, and the exhaustion were almost over. Yet even in the relief, there was a quiet sense of connection that neither expected. Descending carefully toward the smoke, they encountered their final challenge, a partially frozen creek. The ice was thin in spots, the snow slippery. Andre tested each step carefully, and Lena followed his lead, her confidence steady now. When a thin patch of ice cracked slightly beneath him, Lena instinctively grabbed his arm again, steadying him. He looked at her, a mixture of surprise and admiration in his eyes. "You've become braver than I imagined," he said quietly. She smiled, a little breathless from the exertion. "I learned from the best," she replied, teasing lightly, though there was a genuine pride in her voice. Finally, after careful steps and mutual support, they reached the other side. The smoke grew clearer, and the outlines of small wooden houses appeared through the snow-covered trees. They had made it. Safety was within reach. Andre and Lena exchanged a glance, each feeling a mix of relief, pride, and a subtle, unspoken bond that had grown stronger with every challenge they had faced together. As they entered the village, the locals noticed them immediately. People came out to offer help, warm blankets, hot drinks, and guidance to the nearest lodge. Andre thanked them quietly, ensuring that Lena was comfortable and warm. She was amazed at the contrast between the quiet, dangerous forest and the safe, welcoming village. The warmth of human presence, simple hospitality, and safety was overwhelming after days of survival in the harsh wilderness. Once inside the lodge, they were given hot drinks and warm food. Lena sat down, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup, feeling the heat seep into her cold fingers. Andre checked her leg again, gently massaging it to relieve stiffness. She looked at him with gratitude, not just for saving her life, but for treating her with respect, care, and quiet kindness. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You don't need to," he replied. "You made it through this journey with me. That's thanks enough." They sat together in silence for a while, watching the snow fall outside the window. Lena realized how much she had changed over the past days. Fear had turned into courage, helplessness into resilience, and a stranger in the forest had become someone she trusted completely. Andre, for his part, reflected on her bravery and resourcefulness. She had surprised him countless times, and each moment of courage had strengthened his respect for her. As night approached, Lena did something unexpected. She took Andre's hand gently, a gesture of both gratitude and connection. It was a small, simple act, but it carried weight. He looked at her, surprised at first, then returned the gesture, understanding that this moment was not just about the journey they had survived, but about the bond they had formed in the face of danger. I don't know what I would have done without you," she admitted, her voice soft and sincere. "You would have made it too," Andre said, smiling gently. "But I'm glad I was here. I'm glad we faced this together." They shared a quiet moment, the lodge warm around them, safe from the cold and snow. For the first time in days, there was no immediate danger, no uncertainty. Just trust, respect, and a growing connection between two people who had survived the taiga together. As the evening continued, they shared stories about their lives beyond the forest. Lena told Andre about her city life, her ambitions, and how she had longed for a brief escape into the wilderness. Andre shared memories of growing up near the edge of the taiga, his family, and the lessons he had learned from living close to nature. Their conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter, curiosity, and a quiet appreciation for one another. By nightfall, the lodge was quiet, the storm outside finally calming. Lena sat by the window, watching the snow fall softly, and Andre sat beside her. They didn't need words. The day's experiences had already said everything. She rested her head lightly against his shoulder, a small gesture of comfort and trust. He felt a protective warmth and a quiet admiration for her strength. The journey through the taiga had tested them, challenged them, and forced them to face fear and uncertainty. But it had also brought them closer, revealing courage, resilience, and a connection neither expected. Lena realized that the forest had taught her more than survival. It had taught her about trust, bravery, and the value of partnership. Andre realized the same. Sometimes, the people you least expect to surprise you reveal a strength that inspires and changes you. As the night deepened, Lena finally spoke softly. "Thank you, Andre. Not just for saving me, but for showing me that I can be stronger than I thought." He smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "You've shown me too. Bravery isn't just about skill or strength, it's about heart, and you've proven you have plenty of it." They sat together quietly, the snow falling softly outside, the warmth of the lodge around them, and the understanding that their bond had grown beyond mere circumstance. It was a connection born of trust, courage, and shared experience in the harshest of places. They had survived the taiga together, and in doing so, they had discovered something far more profound than survival. They had discovered each other. As the night wore on, Lena and Andre knew that the forest would always be a part of their story. The cold, snow, and danger had tested them in ways neither could have imagined. But they had endured, learned, and grown stronger, not just individually, but together. The experience left an unspoken promise that whatever challenges life might bring, they could face them with courage, trust, and the quiet bond formed in the heart of the taiga. And in the safety of the lodge, away from the harsh wilderness, Lena did one last unexpected thing. She turned to Andre with a shy but sincere smile. "I'm glad I met you," she said softly. Andre met her gaze, warmth in his eyes. "Me too," he replied. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the forest in a soft blanket of white. But inside, there was light, warmth, and connection. A reminder that even in the coldest, most dangerous places, human courage and trust could create warmth stronger than any fire. And so, their story ended not just with survival, but with hope, gratitude, and the unexpected bond of two strangers brought together by the wilderness, who would not forget the lessons they had learned, or the courage they had discovered in each other.